Good afternoon, everybody. Like I said, Seth Miller from PaxX.Aero, and I'm actually in an overhead bin there, lying flat. The picture's a little funny, but go with it. It works. Yesterday at the Passenger Experience Conference, we kicked off the day talking about the seamless experience, and I was moderating that session as well in the morning and suggested that maybe seamless is the wrong goal. That in fact we're looking at a glorious quilt was the phrase I used, that the seams actually provide value to the travel experience. As a passenger, yes, it's cool to have a smooth travel experience. No one wants a delay, no one wants lost baggage, but the transition from I'm at home to I'm at the airport to I'm on the plane to I'm sleeping on the plane or having some of those seams are actually useful. In this case, I think the answer is they're not, and I hope that we're going to, these guys are getting worried because I didn't tell them about this. The answer is that they're not. We actually don't want connectivity to have those seams. The connectivity part, I think it's great to be seamless. You don't want to have that experience, but some of the other parts, it's not so bad. You want to have that luxury of being in the airport, going to lunch, and be like, I'm relaxed now. I don't have to work for a few minutes, maybe. So we're going to kick this off and get started talking. We've got 2 satellite providers, 2 airlines. I'm going to have our panel introduce themselves here real quick in a second, and then talk about what it means to really take that experience and make it seamless, both from the provider side, from the consumer side, or the airline side, and what you think it is from the passenger side. And I guess since I'm a passenger, I'll play that role as well too. But let's get started. Norm, can we start with you and just quick down the line introductions so everybody knows who we're dealing with, and then we'll get into real questions.
Yeah, sure. I'm Norman. I lead in-flight connectivity, IFE, and advertising at Air Canada.
David Scotland. I lead guest experience for Inflight and specializing in in-flight experience or in-flight entertainment and connectivity.
I'm Ben Griffin. I'm Vice President Aviation at OneWeb, providing low Earth orbit satellite to the aviation world and beyond.
And I'm the second Ben on the panel, Ben Murphy. I head up North American sales and accounts for Intelsat.
Am I on? Yeah. Thanks, guys. I mean, the LEO-GEO hybrid solution is now almost real. It's tested real. It's real. It just hasn't quite been fully certified and fully baked and installed yet. But we'll call it real enough. What does that hybrid solution do? How does that change what you're able to deliver to the airlines, what you guys are able to expect from your provider, and what you're going to be able to deliver to me when I'm sitting back in row 32?
I can take it.
I
think what the LEO and GEO offers is, it's insurance. It is a guarantee that the airline and the airline customers are going to have a good experience, regardless of where they're flying, regardless of what the congestion looks like in that network. We're going to be able to pivot to the other network, and there'll be other networks that'll be layered onto it too in the future, and we look forward to it. It's gone exceptionally well from a testing perspective. I've never seen a terminal come to life this quickly and this flawlessly. We flew it a few months ago in Puerto Rico with these gentlemen. And it was a perfect experience. I've never seen that in an early life cycle new product introduction. So we're very excited.
Generally, I think the LEO GEO thing, multi-orbit stuff. You got to go back to Seth, the passenger. What does Seth, the passenger, want to do today, next year, in 5 years' time? And I think very much that multi-orbit stuff addresses all of the use cases across the spectrum, which means when these things are harnessed into aircraft by airlines as part of a digitization process, or even just as a service for passengers to connect, as basic as that. The multi-orbit thing is key to enabling that and make sure all those things are tackled. And it's the technology not just on the satellite side, but also on the terminal on the aircraft side, and we're proud to work very closely with Stellar Blue to bring that to realization.
We actually thought about it a little bit differently. So we had a really unique situation. We have a fleet of 78 regional aircraft that all have ATG4. It's an old system. It needs to be replaced at some point. And they fly a real diverse mix of missions. We have some of them flying to Barrow, Alaska, and we have some of them flying from Seattle to San Jose. And when they're up in Barrow, they don't have geo coverage currently. And when they go to San Jose, they don't have the bandwidth they need for the business traveler. So what we were most interested in was a solution for a regional jet that could meet our guest needs wherever that plane actually happened to be going. And so OneWeb provides the coverage we need up to Barrow, and the GEO network and OneWeb combined can serve greater bandwidth than the existing system on the aircraft when we fly it in those high-frequency trunk routes where the business traveler expects to be able to do whatever they want. So for us, it wasn't really as much about multi-orbit. It was about what can the total system do for the guest experience in these unique cases for that aircraft's mission.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we haven't made a decision yet. Now, I think everybody understands that the LEOs are kind of the future of IFC. And I like what Ben said about, insurance. But it's almost like, when you put insurance on your house or your car, but you don't hope to crash, right? Like, so I think, or your house to burn down. But I think the notion of having interoperability with other constellations as a backup in the event that LEO doesn't really flesh out over time, I think is important. It's an important factor.
LEO is the future. Any comment?
LEO is what?
LEO is the future of connectivity. Any comment?
We think that NGSO in general is the future. We see, GEO will always have a place to play in that environment too. It's got huge benefits in certain aspects too. You can project a ton of capacity in one area. That's where LEO and MEO do struggle from time to time too in congested areas too. So it can fill those areas. It can use that. And for non-latency sensitive applications like streaming applications, things like that, it's ideal for it too. That said, I think that we will use the network that delivers the best experience at that time for the user, whether that's LEO, GEO, MEO, or what have you.
I think for the early systems, we're interested, for the early system where it's going to be just GEO or just LEO at a time, it's going to be a little bit of a guest experience problem to figure out what is that, give them an expectation of what to expect. But I do agree with Norman that LEO is ultimately going to be as how we get to being as close to an on-the-ground experience in the air. But there are certain applications that don't need LEO, and I'm perfectly fine sending that through a GEO pipe if it's less expensive for me. So, LEO is the future for making it feel like a ground experience, but that doesn't mean, for many applications, but it doesn't mean every application has to go through a LEO satellite.
You guys jumped a little bit ahead in my question list here, but I appreciate that. Who gets to decide what traffic goes on LEO and what goes on GEO? How does that get broken up, and how do you ensure a seamless experience for the passengers, and that passenger experience is consistent fleet-wide, especially since only part of your fleet has the LEO?
Yeah, I'll take that. So the short answer is it'll be data-driven, to be honest. This is not going to be something that we just arbitrarily say, this one's going to be LEO, this one's going to be GEO. We will base that off of real statistics as far as network congestion either way. Where aircraft are flying, we know our fleet, we know what's going to be equipped with this, we know where those aircraft are going to be, and we know in some cases where we're going to revert to GEO, or others where we go to LEO. That will evolve over time. That's going to be, we'll call it pretty rudimentary in the beginning too, where we'll basically designate certain markets as a LEO or a GEO market. Then we'll start to shift at certain areas depending on length of flight. If we go into an area that is perceived from data to be better served by LEO or GEO, then we'll switch at that point too. And then, eventually we will start to use some of the technology that we actually developed years and years ago with the air-to-ground network, which is switching advantageously. It's not necessarily looking for the closest signal. This is with respect to cell sites, looking for the strongest signal on the ground. It's looking for the least congested route to put that data through too. So it's going to get more and more advanced over time, and but yeah, we're gonna let the user experience dictate where that goes and deliver the best experience that's out there.
But initially, it would be you might have a route that is just a LEO-only service or a GEO-only service to start.
Yeah, and that's just going to be, this is baby steps a little bit from a development perspective. So that's going to be the easiest to implement. And then the next step would be, say a Chicago to Denver flight. Perhaps the Chicago area is perhaps a little bit congested from a LEO perspective. So we'll geofence an area outside of Chicago, and that's where it will switch to LEO at that point too. I'm just making this up, but that's a possible scenario.
And frankly, from my perspective, one of the advantages of trying the ESA system from Intelsat on the regional fleet is it's a nice little test bed. It's 76 guests on board. It's not, yes, we're going to fly it from Seattle to San Jose, but it's also going to fly to Bozeman and all these other places where, you know, if we're not flying a high-profile aircraft in an area where, you know, if we have a couple flights to San Jose where we try on LEO and see if we can do it without too much congestion, I'm not worried if just 76 people on a couple flights have a bad experience versus sending a brand new flagship MAX 9 or MAX 10 aircraft into one of those markets. There's going to be a different experience there and a different expectation from guests.
Does this is a regional jet solution right now for you. Well, it's not for them. It's being implemented as a regional jet solution for Alaska Airlines. I'll be very kind. You think it
Possibly, yeah.
That's what's been contracted so far?
Yeah.
Would you like to share any additional information?
No, I'll say that.
A new contract signing?
I mean, not with these gentlemen, but there are narrow-body programs that have already kicked off with other airlines too for this. I mean, we started this because we had an immediate need to do something with the regional fleet. As David said, a system was designed before the iPhone, and it is going end of life here shortly. So we had, time constraints to get all those aircraft upgraded either to our system or somebody else. But there is a clock on that. So that was where the immediate focus was. But it's not a regional product too. Yeah. This is something that we'll install on wide bodies, we'll install on narrow bodies too. It's got the horsepower to push it. Yeah.
As implemented on a regional jet, those flights typically are somewhat shorter. I know you have some to the Midwest that are a little bit longer, but are you seeing the same level of demand, the same sort of passengers' expectations of that at home in the sky kind of performance on those flights, and they're yelling at you about it?
You know, it's interesting. So in a paid environment, no. But we've got, through Intelsat, a deal with T-Mobile. And the T-Mobile users use it no matter how long that flight is. And those folks are just as discerning on their flight to Bozeman or their hour-and-a-half flight as they are for a 3-hour flight. So there is a high expectation for it. And so we're excited about it. We are also thinking about the potential of whether or not it could be a mainline solution in the future. Frankly, the existing ThinCom antenna, it can be a challenge to work on. It needs a hangar environment to replace when there's a problem. And so for us, we love the idea that this is a lightweight antenna that could potentially go on a mainline aircraft, and we could do some interesting maintenance on it in outdoor environments where it's just light enough that we can do that we can't do with the existing antenna. So we are curious to see if it can scale up to the mainline and potentially pursue it.
Norm, you guys fly a lot of regional jets too. Similar connectivity experience today with the air-to-ground system.
Worse. We have ATG.
Oh, you don't have ATG?
Yeah, the 4. No, we didn't put the 4
bumps on the side.
Yeah, we didn't.
Okay, so even worse experience. Are your customers pissed?
Yeah, top 5 things they complain about. Yep.
Yeah. So that is then a compelling challenge for you to address.
Yeah, and we're imminently, or I'd say aggressively trying to find a solution for that. I think, LEOs in general, great solution for our region of fleet, especially given our flying profile. For the most part, we're flying in areas where capacity is being wasted anyway. So I think for us, it's advantageous to go down the LEO path. But to the broader point of LEOs ending up on larger jets, we have close to double digits or over double digits flights going over the poles. Unless somebody's going to park a GEO at the pole, there is no other solution outside of a MEO or LEO constellation or this weird new HEO thing. Right? So when I said earlier that LEOs are the future or a similar type of technology, it is what it is. That is the future for an airline like Air Canada.
The partnership between Intelsat and OneWeb, you're a satellite operator but didn't launch your own satellites to do this. Why not?
Well, I would say, and I'll defer this to Ben in a second too, but I mean, we were a early investor in OneWeb too, as you know, before the bankruptcy, before both of our bankruptcies, to be clear. And so, we believe in the technology, we believe in the platform. We actually have quite a bit of staff from OneWeb on our staff too. We think it's the right solution, and it's truly, it speaks to the KU environment and ecosystem, in that, it's no different for us to be buying OneWeb's capacity than it is buying Eutelsat capacity, SES capacity, JSAT capacity. That ecosystem has proved very strong for all parties, and this is just an extension.
And I think in by way of the other way around as well, we took a very conscious decision to bring an IFC solution that was created by the industry for the industry, right? So we didn't do any vertical integration. We looked at it very closely, and we decided actually the best thing to do is use people who are already doing it and save a lot of the pain that we would have gone through to do those things. So Intelsat was an obvious solution or partner for us to be able to harness the power of what OneWeb's doing and bring it to the airline community. It makes so much sense.
You mentioned buying capacity from Eutelsat as well, that you're going to be doing a lot more of that soon, I guess, assuming this deal goes through. How does this partnership grow from here? Is it just more capacity, more and more?
I mean, the gentleman on the panel today, like, I anticipate selling it to a lot more of my partners in the industry too. This has got a lot of traction, a lot of attention. I see us growing a lot of terminals with these guys, and it'll just go forward from here.
And we tend to evolve the network, right?
Yeah.
So we don't just stop with where we are. There's always more and more need for capacity, so we will putting more and more up through the course of this decade and beyond, because there's an insatiable need for it everywhere. And we hope to overcome, the potential limitations around the hubs just by adding more and more capacity over there as well. So we're confident we're going the right way, and we're confident that OneWeb stuff is going to be leveraged and delivered in a way that that Eutelsat will make sensible for the customers.
You sort of brought up the Gen 2 constellation there. You hinted at the Gen 2 constellation at least. There's been some interesting discussions about what that architecture looks like. Is it a full geo coverage? Is it a full global coverage? Not geo, it's still in LEO. Or is it more targeted additional capacity in key areas and things like that? Has there been any further development on that or decisions made about what you're doing?
Well, it's interesting because whatever rumor is rife is pure speculation. So we're still very much in beyond the design phase, more in the sort of RFP phase for that, to determine what's the technology out there, how can we harness it, how do we best deliver it. So I don't think it's towards the end of this year we'll have a much better idea about what it is, what it looks like, how it will behave, how that power will be put down in certain places of the Earth. So it would be premature of me to start saying those things. I know, yeah.
Well, I think, look, I think times are changing, right? Like, I think, all these guys went bankrupt because they were banking on, these 10% take rate type of environments. Like, amongst the airline worlds, even, my colleagues in the airline world, I don't know one that's not contemplating or business case approved, we're going free, but like slowly we're getting to that point. So I think now the equation has changed to everybody gets internet on the back of the airline, not relying on the customer to convert. Should change the pace of innovation for this space, right? Like, again, look at North America. I don't know a major airline in North America that's not, if not already, offering some level of free, contemplating going free relatively soon. It's a survival thing now.
When are you going to get it there, Dave? He was sort of asking, not me.
It's an expensive proposition, and we'll continue to look at it, but it's not something that I'm going to commit to today.
It's an expensive proposition, and it's something that we're going to look at, but we're not going to commit today. His mic wasn't on there. I want to make sure everybody got that quote. That was from him. Fair enough. But to the point of the sort of the paid plans, you mentioned the T-Mobile as an option. Historically, Intelsat in the GoGo world, you had a monthly subscription plan. I know Air Canada has made that part of the loyalty program for top elites as an option. Sort of, there's some ways that gets bundled and sort of sold differently, but does adding the LEO capacity, sort of the upgraded version of connectivity on the regional jets, change the value proposition of those plans for your customers? Is that a sort of thing that they're coming to you for?
I could tell you, for us, for the regionals, we're going free, full free, from day one.
For everybody on board?
Everybody on board.
Not just the messaging like you're doing on your big planes?
No.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first. Like, we are going free. That's what we went to the market with. We're looking for less complexity. Because again, this is about passenger experience, especially on those small RJs, right? So they do fly incredibly important markets for us: Chicago, Boston, New York, and out west, into places like Seattle, from Vancouver and Calgary, Portland. So they do operate very, very key markets for us. What I'll confirm is the airplane will be lighter, but Wi-Fi will be there for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
From my perspective, they just get our guests will start off by getting a better experience for the same price.
Yeah.
And right now, that's one of the leading reasons we need to improve the service on the regional jet fleet. Is when we look at the customer experience numbers, they're just frankly significantly lower than on a satellite equipped aircraft. So that's kind of first step, and we'll see where the market goes if and when we need to change our pricing structure further.
I said I was going to I would approach this session as the passenger Seth. Now I'm going to be the tech ops and maintenance Seth for a tiny second. I'm terribly unqualified for this role, don't worry. How are you seeing the value of the increased and improved connectivity in terms of delivering sort of back office, whether it's the flight attendants with a connected app or maintenance and aircraft monitoring, those sorts of things? Obviously, that was definitely not an option on the ATG or ATG4 system, at least not a functional option. Is that coming into play now, and then are you guys going to be able to deliver it? But
I think on the Alaska front, I get hit up almost every week from our flight ops team or from our in-flight team interested in different ways that they can use connectivity, primarily from a safety aspect. So it's not necessarily driving ROI as much as it's how do I avoid turbulence? How, if I have a medical, can I call the ground and talk to a doctor who can walk me through it and hopefully make sure that a passenger is safe and that they can administer the care that they need to. They're looking at it mostly from the safety and aspects of the system rather than any kind of ROI from aircraft health monitoring or anything like that. That's additional goodness, but let's first start with let's take care of our guests, and then we can get to the economics later.
Yeah, from our perspective, look, we're a global carrier, right? We go everywhere. I think the turbulence reporting thing is it's pretty key. We went down that path with Intelsat, our partner, years ago, and now the connected cabin, where the crew, it empowers what they do, right? Knowing more about who they're dealing with, I think is incredibly powerful as it pertains to delivering service on board. So, I mean, we're pretty mature in that realm. LEO, GEO, MEO, HEO doesn't change that conversation. I think internet's the internet. As long as we can serve their devices, I think there'll always be at least qualitative benefits, but with the pilots, there are absolute quantitative benefits, especially if you operate over the oceans.
And if I'm a contrarian for a second, I think there's a lot of talk about empowering your in-flight employees to be able to use real-time data in some really important way. But the fact of the matter is, for a lot of our flights, at least under 6 hours, you don't necessarily need to be updating all that much throughout the flight for the cabin crew to still deliver a tailored experience. Before we depart, their app is already loaded with the passenger manifest, who's an elite customer, who's had a bad experience with us the last time they flew, and if they issue comp during the flight, if the connectivity isn't available, as soon as they land, it pushes. So that's also a great experience for a guest, that as soon as they get off the airplane, we're sending them compensation. That's not that much of a delay versus if we did it in real time on the aircraft itself. So I think the cabin crew scenario for connected really does lend itself more to the safety aspect. I do agree with Norman, though, in the flight deck, when you can optimize your flight paths in real time, absolutely you're going to save on fuel, and that's great for everybody.
And size of airplanes matter, right? That's a 450-seat 777. Absolutely, you need a bit more real-time passenger, information updates. People misconnect mid-flight, right?
But connection honestly, we get connection information already through ATG4. Like it's such a small packet that we can get that. So like our flight attendants have the live connecting flight information already from the tiny packet. So I'm not too concerned about.
Yeah, the point I was going to make too is all the flight optimization software that was kind of being talked about too. That is all present and being used in the ATG environment too, because it is lightweight. Not even what David talked about, but getting weather updates. That's not heavy. That's not heavy data. I think you kind of started that conversation with the tech ops hat on, and all of my friends in tech ops at both of these organizations want a product in which they don't have to get on the crown of the aircraft and remove on a regular basis. And from a tech ops perspective, that's what this delivers. There are no moving parts. This thing is designed to stay on top of that aircraft for a very long time and not be touched too. And it's what the industry has been striving for a number of years, and we're here now.
Great. I have more questions, not surprising, but anyone in the audience that wants to throw something up at these guys, I'm also happy to entertain that. I will keep going, but wave at me at some point if catch my attention. Right now. Here we go.
Hello, Mark Holmes via Satellite. I have a question for Norm and David. We've been doing these types of panels for quite a few years now. I'm just sort of curious, in terms of, I would give the satellite industry a mark out of 10 in terms of how well you feel they're doing in terms of catering for your needs with the solutions. There always seems a lot of confusion amongst airlines, amongst the LEO, MEO, GEO type solutions. We've been doing this for a few years now. I mean, overall mark out of 10 for the satellite industry so far, with 0 being not so good, 10 being excellent. What would you give the satellite industry?
You want to go first, Dave, or?
I think the complexity does make it difficult for airlines to know what's the right path for them. But I do think the level of innovation is getting to a point now where I'm really happy with it. I'm not going to score. I'm also in a position where he's my only satellite operator. I don't have anyone else, or internet operator in general, so I don't have anyone else to grade. So any grade would be a reflection of Intelsat. I'm not going to do that. But I think the industry itself is innovating at a pace that I'm much more happy with. And honestly, it's getting to the point where even senior leadership is starting to understand the differences now that we've talked about it long enough. So I'm excited to see these things that we've talked about come to fruition. We've been talking about LEO for a long time. When we did satellite the first time, we said we're really excited because then there's this next generation coming, and execs are like, when is that coming again? And it's finally going to be here next year. So I actually think we're getting to a better place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, Ben and I, we've been, working together for many years, and I don't think, they say hindsight's 20/20. We wouldn't have made another decision, right? So I think the decisions we've made were the best decision. If I were to score the industry, though, it's a very different conversation, and it's about what's out there, right? And I would say the space hasn't innovated as fast as obviously airlines would want, but it's innovated, right? It's just, when the advent of satellite came about and more throughput, it was about the use case. The big use case was people streaming, right, on board. Well, what we're seeing is that's not necessarily the only thing people do on board. So, now people want to get engaged with their Teams meetings, right? Or at least, not be detached from an important thing going on the ground while you're in air. So, I'd grade the industry at a 5, but obviously not going to grade our partner. They've been great, and we would not have made a different decision. And we do have a multi-supplier environment that we operate in today. So, industry, not that great. 5, good try. They're trying. But I think there's room for tons of improvement. But I think with the advent of LEO and the MEOs and the HEOs, I think we're now getting into that game-changing phase where we're excited to see what happens next.
And Norman brings up a good point about Teams meetings. I remember some of the first conversations I had about ESA. Someone tried to sell me that it's great for gaming. I said, okay, but I'm in a paid Wi-Fi environment. I can't imagine very many people are going to buy just a game. Gaming is growing as an interest amongst the consumer pool, but that's not the primary use case for the majority of people buying. It's Teams. It's being able to have a real-time document that they can edit, and they can do it without any sort of interruption in connection. And LEO's going to get us that experience much better than GEO does today. So I think the satellite companies have a long way to improve in their marketing and sales campaigns, and actually understanding how a guest on board an aircraft is going to use it, and then trying to sell it to me in an airline as that use case.
Any other questions from the crowd? Mary?
Hi guys, my name's Marianne from Jetway Communications, PR agency. Just on the marketing side, I'm wondering how you guys are planning to let your passengers know that they now, well, in 2024 when it's ready, that they're going to have this amazing in-flight experience across the entire fleet. And in your previous marketing efforts, like whether it's in-flight announcements or a notification in the magazine or something in your app, like what's been the best way to let people know that the service is available that really promotes uptake?
So there's a couple ways, right? Like, look, the average person, they don't read airline press releases. Nobody cares, right? Like, I think us here in this room, we care about that stuff. Social, yeah, right? Bloggers that are really popular in travel, absolutely. We are an in-flight entertainment airline. Like, every narrow body that flies the mainline livery has a seat back, and I think that's been the best way to communicate directly with our consumers while in the moment. But pre-flight, it's the non-traditional airline outlets that I think we get the most traction on.
From my perspective, when I think of that day of passenger experience or day of guest experience, honestly, text messages have done really well for us. We actually learned this kind of the wrong way in that we notified guests in advance if they weren't going to have Wi-Fi on their flight, and the amount of engagement we get with that is incredible. We had this problem where guests would get on board an aircraft and there'd be an outage for whatever reason, and they would inform the flight attendants that, hey, it really sucks that we don't have Wi-Fi, and the flight attendants didn't even know. So that was how we were measuring engagement right there, was when a guest came on board and already knew, and that was just via text message. So I would imagine we'll do something really similar for ESA to let them know they're on a brand new aircraft, they're on an aircraft with a brand new Wi-Fi system, and go test it out for us. And I think we'll get a lot of take rate that way. We also do have an announcement in flight that talks about Wi-Fi. We don't have seatback, so we rely primarily on announcements, text messages, and kind of pre-flight communications.
And it's funny, I'll add one more thing, and I think it's downplayed a lot. Like, airplanes going free Wi-Fi, making these investments. These investments are so large, you can buy more airplanes with them, right? Like, that's how expensive these things are. So they're big decisions for the airlines, and I think in the event that we go free and we stand behind that free product, I mean, you're going to know when you're booking your plane ticket, right? That it's going to be in your face as a USP, something that sets us apart from the other option. And if the other option has it, then it's a combination of seat back, free Wi-Fi, all sorts of other things that we would be able to offer. But again, in the moment, as you're booking, even when you're searching for a flight, Wi-Fi now became one of the most important attributes to travel.
Anyone else? Questions from the audience here?
I have a question for Ben.
Which Ben?
OneWeb.
I was going to defer it there, but carry on.
It's a very OneWeb specific question. What does the deal flow look like for OneWeb? I mean, you've been talking about aviation for a little while now, but we haven't really seen sort of concrete evidence of deals. When are we going to see some, I guess, sort of some statement airline deals on behalf of OneWeb?
I don't count.
Well, as you know, we go through distribution partners, right? And of course, their success is very important to us because that's ultimately how we source revenue. So, I would, very bravely defect that question to Ben Intelsat, Ben. But just to finish off a little bit, there's a huge swell of momentum going on there, and Mark, you've been in this industry a long time. Decisions aren't made overnight. These are complicated, expensive decisions, as we've been saying. They take many months to come through. We started working together a year and a half ago or so. So now is the natural gestation time for these processes, these evaluations to come to a close. So I think, and I hope Ben's going to say the same thing, that in the coming weeks and months you'll start to see a proliferation of announcements, agreements that certainly vindicate the decision that my friend here has made for his airline. So, anything to add on the
Anything that's ready to be announced, or what is
Do you expect more contracts this year? Is what he's
Oh,
said.
absolutely. Yeah, big contracts. Yeah, 100%.
Okay. We're getting towards the end of our session here, so I want to go back to where we started with seams and erasing them, specifically with the connectivity experience. Free helps. It just works. Helps. Performance helps. How does that better connectivity experience that you're now delivering help make not the connectivity seams, but the other seams either disappear or more friendly, let's say, of it's a relaxing transition from the curb to the gate to the plane as opposed to a chaotic and stressful one? What is that passenger experience benefit that you're going to truly derive? Not just I can stay connected and do my Teams meeting, but what is the true passenger value that you're going to get by having this next generation system on board and being able to deliver it?
Yeah, look, I think, especially for us, right? For people within, most of us in this room, I find we're workaholics, right? Like we work all the time, but mostly because we travel and, you need to be connected to different time zones. But again, the extra dimension of staying productive in flight, if you're over the pole, if you're over the Atlantic or the Pacific, you're on a long haul flight. I don't know. I think the value prop there alone is humongous, and not just for airline employees, or people within the industry, but also like imagine if you're a consultant, right? And you're preparing for that big pitch in London, and you're headed over from Toronto, which is the way you should go, by the way, if you guys are flying. So just always staying connected and productive. Not thinking that the use case is truly built around Netflix. I think it was interesting, but that's not necessarily how it fleshed out. I think it's key and clutch.
And I'll just build on that point. Like the traveler of today is someone who may work in an office a few days a week, and then they're taking a long weekend in Mexico City or wherever, and they need to be connected on their way there because they want to, as soon as they get there, be able to enjoy it, and they use the flight as part of their working time. And so they expect to have a reasonable internet connection, and then on the way home, it may be a day when they don't want to work and they just want to relax and they want to stream their whatever. So the use case is really that they need to be able to do whatever they do on the ground. We've been saying that forever. It's finally coming to fruition, and it's really so that a guest doesn't have to think about how they do their life differently when they're in their air. They just do whatever they need to do.
Yeah. And I would say too that the percentages of guests using our service has changed during COVID too. It was predominantly just a business traveler luxury that they were using, and no one in the back of the cabin was really using it, or minimal. What COVID has done is it's brought a lot more leisure travelers into our space, and those leisure travelers are younger in a lot of cases, and they have a lot of different use cases, social being one too. And the one thing that they expect is they expect it to work at the same way that it does on the ground, whereas that business traveler was used to, I can't do this application because I know I'm in there. Well, that expectation is now like to our new user base, and we need to deliver something that is acceptable to them. And that's things like doom scrolling through through social, and you can't do that on Geo. You just can't. It can't keep up with it too. So that's what the system and what the network delivers too.
Can I ask that be disabled? We'd all be better if there was less doom scrolling. That's all I'm saying. And on that note, we are now out of time. Thank you, Norman, David, Ben, and Ben. Big round of applause for our panelists.